Welcome to Emran's podcast, episode number 44. This is your host, Suman Silva.
But I'm just as proud for, that person who ran a sub-4 marathon as I am for the person who is, ran their first mile straight through.
Visit emrans.com to listen to our previous podcast shows, links to our social media channels, and more. I would like to welcome Kristin Long to Emran's podcast. Kristin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing good. Have you recovered from your Dopey challenge? You recently ran Disney, 4 days, 5 days, a week?
I think we were down there forever. No, we ran for 4 days. So, yes, I'm trying to recover, but I got home and I had to go to work bright and early the next morning. So there wasn't a whole lot of recovery time.
How long does it usually take you to recover from an event like this? You have done this multiple times already, correct?
Right. This was my 4th year to do it. I just listen to my body and see how I feel. And I feel pretty good right now. And my job, I'm a fitness group exercise instructor. So I don't get a whole lot of time off. So I ran races and came right home and taught my class, and I really haven't skipped too much of a beat, to be honest with you, but I have slowed down the running last week. I took a few days off, but I'm ready to get right back to it.
Same here. I'm trying to slow down my running, especially beating down. I put myself through last 3 months of 2016. I have to slow it down. So,
well, running a race like that I ran last weekend, it was a total of 48.6 miles. You run several days in a row. So even in my training, I would run 4 days in a row. So when I come home, it's kind of weird not to run. And so I'm just so used to running that in my training, we didn't take a whole lot of time off. So even now, I don't recover too long. If I do, then I don't feel right.
Definitely. I do a lot of stage race. I think you are in a similar situation, but a little bit in a fun place. I'm running the trails and you're running through the Disney. But
right.
But this whole stage, I guess, different multi-day running. How do you recover from day to day? Is it a technique? I know that I hear that some people are asking this kind of questions. I don't have experience running 4 days on the pavement, so yeah. I just wanted to know. How does that work?
Well, to be honest with you, the running on the pavement and on the road, the actual running to me was not the hard part because I could run 4 days in a row and be fine. And plus down there at Disney, you go to the parks, you're on vacation, you walk around. And so you stay loose. You don't go back to your room, or at least I don't. We don't go back to the room and just sit in the room and where we feel stiff and things like that. So we just keep loose and we keep moving. But what's really hard about that race is we have to wake up at, 2:30 in the morning because you have to be on your shuttles no later than 4 a.m. So, and that's when the last buses run. So you really have to be on the shuttle, by 3 o'clock, 3:30. And that's what's hard is waking up 4 days in a row, like the early morning hours. If we didn't have to do that, then I think I could do it and wouldn't even be so tired, but it's the waking up so early. And then you do have to kind of go to bed a little bit earlier than what you would normally go to bed because you've got to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. So for me, the hardest part was balancing my meals and the waking up. It wasn't necessarily the running because I was trained to run. So that didn't really bother me so much. But it was the meals and the sleep.
Definitely. And I think that's the biggest challenge for you guys to get you're from Central Time Zone that you already lose an hour and then getting up.
Right.
Yeah. Your body's not used to it.
Yeah. And the races are just fun. It's definitely not a PR kind of course or anything like that. Some of the roads are narrow and there's a lot of people and not to mention you're just having fun. It's hard not to have fun when you're running past Mickey Mouse on the side of the road.
Definitely.
It just is not, it's not a normal race. And I look back at some of my pictures, and I'm looking at it and there's a Captain Hook over here and a Tinker Bell and a Mickey Mouse and somebody dressed up like Alice in Wonderland, and you're like, this is just crazy. But it's a lot of fun. It really is.
Definitely. Seems like you have a lot of passion in running. You've been running. I know you through running, and tell us about your running journey. How did you start running? Were you a lifetime runner, or you picked up running like I did?
A little bit later in life. I had 3 kids, and I'm married, and I stayed at home with them for, as long as they were babies, and I got them all off to school. And when my little one, my youngest, when he was starting kindergarten, I just felt like I was just the typical stay-at-home mom, and I was always up at the schools and volunteering and just doing all of the things that a mom would do every day, which was great. I mean, I love doing that. But I didn't exercise. I didn't put myself first. I didn't do anything like that. And I've always been one to exercise and do things. For my 35th birthday, my little boy was going off to school, and I thought, well, I'm going to train and run a 5K. And so I did. But I didn't I didn't really know anything about running. And so I thought I could just get out there, for a couple of weeks and, run around the park, and I'd be trained to run a 5K. And I got out there, and my time was okay, but I could only run about half of it. And I was so frustrated, so mad, so angry, and so many people passing me. And, I'm pretty competitive too. And so I made it my goal to get out in my neighborhood, and I just trained and trained and trained. And I thought, if it kills me, I'm going to run a 5K all the way through. And so the following April, I finally ran a 5K where I ran the whole time straight through. But what was fun about it was when I got out there on the first time I ran a 5K, I thought, well, my gosh, this is a huge social event. I didn't even know all this happened on Saturday mornings. And so it just kind of became where, over time I would register for another 5K and another 5K. And then, if I'd see a few more friends and meet more people. And before I knew it, some of my friends were like, oh, well, I'd like to do that. And so it just became a huge social event for me. And over time, I became, a better runner. And I got to a point to where I, could run a decent 5K, and I was pretty fast and all of that. I find that for me, the more pressure that I put on myself as far as, running fast and running for time and PRs and all of that, I just beat myself up with it. And if I just take it easy and I relax and I have fun with it, sometimes I run fast, sometimes I don't. And so over the years, I just have become kind of a social runner. And I like it. And I don't like to, really push myself every single time. I just like to have fun with it. And so that's kind of what I've done over the years.
Definitely. And you do have fun. I've seen.
I do.
Tell us about how did you start picking up marathon and beyond 5K distance? What was the motivation? Was it just a natural progression and you saw your friends running marathons and half marathons, or?
No, not at all. I work at the YMCA, and when I first started running the 5Ks, I'll never forget, I walked back into the gym, and there was a lady that was back there picking up one of her kids out of the nursery. And I walked up behind her, and she had on a Walt Disney World marathon shirt. And at that time, I didn't even know that existed. And I said, hey, tell me about your shirt. Tell me about this. And she said, oh, I just ran the Walt Disney World Marathon. I said, oh my gosh. I said, I just started running. I didn't even know they had them there. Well, my sister had been running for about a year, and she kind of just found out about it too. And I called her like right then, and I said, hey, we need to go run at Walt Disney World. And she said, I just thought about that too. Let's do it. And so she was a little bit better of a runner than I was at the time. And so she signed up to run the Walt Disney World full marathon. And I said, well, I'll sign up to run the half. And I said, I don't even think I can do that, but I guess I'll have a year to train for it. And so that's kind of how it started, just because I thought, oh my gosh, my worlds just collided right here at the gym. And so I just had it in my mind I was going to do a half marathon. And then for me, it was also another excuse to go there, to go to Disney. And so I brought my whole family, and we went on a trip, and then we did the Disney cruise, and we ran the races. And so we were there for like 2 weeks, and I really thought that would be a one and done. I thought this is a once in a lifetime thing. I'll never do this again. I've got to go all out. And here I am, like 10 years later, I'm still doing it. And now I go and don't even take my kids when I go. But, it's just really, I thought I'll never be able to do this again. I'll never be able to train like this again. And and now it's just a habit. I've made it. I've just incorporated it into my life and my lifestyle. And so now I'm always training, and, I'd go run a half marathon every weekend if I could somewhere. But, I need a money tree or a sugar daddy for that for sure. But it was a lot of fun, that very first one, training for it. And I never thought I would do it again, but now I do it all the time.
So how many marathons and half marathons have you done since then? Do you have any count on that?
Yeah, I've done 12 marathons, and I've done 44 half marathons total. So, and several of my marathons have been at Disney World. So we always do the half marathon the day before. So that kind of makes that a little more challenging. But so 12.
Gotcha.
I just did the New York City last year too. So that was a huge one, but 12 total.
We'll talk about the New York City in a little bit. Let's talk about your social media brand, or your personal brand that you have called By My Girl Runs. You're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, everywhere, correct?
Yeah, she's my alter ego. I created that several years ago. I was actually at a race, and I was on a bus headed, either to the race or coming from the race, or where I don't know which way we were going. But my cousin was on the bus with me, and a girl came up to her and said, "Hey, are you so-and-so?" And she recognized her from social media, which I thought was hilarious at the time. And so I said, "Well, what is this Instagram? I don't know anything about it." And it was brand new. Like, the app, I think, was 2 weeks old. And so I created it right then, and I got on it, and I didn't think too much about it. I had a Twitter account at that time, and I would get on it every once in a while. So that was probably, 2009, 2010, something like that. So, later on in the year, I went to another race, and it was a Disney race, and someone had mentioned that they went to a party, and it was for bloggers and social media influencers and things like that. And I said, well, I'm on all that stuff, but I just post all my photos to Facebook, just like everybody else does. And they said, "Oh, no. You need to be active. You need to have a blog. You need to be on Instagram." And I said, "Well, I have all of that. I'm just not very active on it." They said, "No, play around with it." And so I got on it, and I really just started kind of playing around on it. And I, created the Bama Girl Runs, and I started really doing some research on just finding your niche and finding, following the people with the same interests that I had, and, having those people follow me back. And then it got to be just this weird little community of, when I went to races or, different things, that it was kind of all the same people, like the same social media influencers. And I started getting invited to different things, and, getting products sent to me and things like that. And it just literally kind of grew. I don't want to say overnight, because it wasn't overnight, but now, it is a lot of fun, and I have had some really, really cool experiences through all of that. And it's a little weird sometimes, because I'll go places and people recognize me, or, ask me to get a picture with them. And I still think all that kind of thing is kind of crazy, but it's a lot of fun, because it's become one of those things where if you go to a destination race, you might as well get to know the people that are standing next to you at the start line. And so I know the people in Birmingham, where I'm from, and all of that, but it's really a lot of fun to go out of town, to go to Chicago, New York, Orlando, wherever I go, and I know lots of people there. So it's just a real cool experience to experience running that way, because I never would have thought, just by creating all of that it would be that way.
Definitely.
And so it's just put a whole different spin on it, and it is a lot of fun. But it is also one of those things that you can get really sucked into, and you can spend a lot of time on it, and it can become like a little part-time job. I mean, because if you have companies that send you products, and you've got to really follow through with, writing a review and using them, and, doing giveaways and all that kind of thing. It's very, very time consuming. And so sometimes, a lot of people don't really understand what goes into all of that. To be successful at it, you have to spend the time behind it. And I feel like I never quit working. Like I feel like I wake up in the mornings and I go to bed at night and I'm always working in a good way. I won't say it's anything like manual labor or anything like that, but my mind is it's always working. And I try to keep all of that very, inspirational, motivating. I keep it clean. I don't want, I see a lot of, people on social media that do a lot of, inappropriate things, especially in the fitness industry and that side of it. And, I really do try to keep my brand the way that I am. I'm a little silly and I can be a little funny, I guess.
Definitely.
I don't know.
Yeah. But, I can relate. I can relate to your stories on this one too.
Yeah.
Because I created that brand, Marathon Runs, and like yours, it's kind of alter ego, and it goes out and does stuff. It used to do more stuff.
And one of the biggest compliments that somebody ever gave me, and I've had several people tell me this, when they read my blog or, my Instagram, and then they meet me in person, they will say, you're exactly like when I'm reading your blog and now that I've met you in person, you sound exactly the same. Like you sound exactly like I would have thought you did. And that's very important to me because I don't want to try to be something that I'm not. And so I don't want to put it out there, on social media that I can do this, 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 and this. And then, in my real life, I'm really not backing it up. Like I like to be exactly in a social way that I am in real life. And so I hope it comes across that way. Some days I know it may not, but I really if I put it out there that I care about something, I really want people to know that I care about it. I'm not just saying that. And so to me, that was a huge compliment, but I try to make it all consistent.
That's really important. Even though people may not know you directly, but they know the other side, the runner side of you, the brand side of you. And
right.
Because they've been following you for so long. Sometimes I meet people, it's like, are you really a marathon runner? I said, yep. Because when people see me first time, they don't realize I'm the one man behind the marathon run most of the time. So
right.
And it's just whatever you do, like you said, you got to back it up, and whatever you say out there, and you cannot just throw things out. You have to be real. That's what we do.
I agree.
Moving on to our topic and talking about Bama Girl runs. Recently, you ran New York City Marathon, and you had a totally different experience beyond running a marathon than any of us had it running the New York City Marathon. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah. So I applied. This was my 6th year to apply. Last year was, and I finally got accepted. And I tell you, I was over the moon excited to be accepted. I mean, I got the email and I just cried and cried like a baby. It was just at the top of my list. I had always wanted to do it. And, I've had several friends that do it and they come home and just say how wonderful it was. And I could only imagine. And I've been to New York City before, so I could really just imagine how great it was. Just out of my own excitement, I was excited to train for it. Like I could not wait to train for that marathon. And I know that sounds crazy that, oh gosh, you've got to run, hundreds of thousands of miles. But I was just ready for it. And I'd wanted it for so long. And I got an email one day from the marathon itself, New York Roadrunners Association. And they said that they were launching a brand new ambassador program and they would love to have me be a part of it. And at first I thought, well, wow, how great is this? But I know so many people on social media. I thought, well, there has to be hundreds of people, that they're picking. And they said that they wanted someone from, to represent, each portion of the country. And so I thought, well, they have to have at least 50. And the more and more I was in communication with them, I realized that there were only about 7 of us that they picked. And they just told me that they liked me and there was something about me that they liked. And, I was a mom and I was going to train and just live a normal life. And I was from Alabama and they thought they were just fascinated with that. I was really just blown away by the whole thing because this is a global event. It's not just running a marathon in my local town. New York City Marathon it's a major marathon. And so they let me take over their Instagram account one day, and they told me, we just want you to be yourself. They didn't want me to be anything more than I was, anything less than I was, just be myself. And so I did, I went and I took over the Instagram account, and I filmed, silly little things about, through my day, and, how I trained that day, and I had to work all day, and I taught my senior citizens, aerobics in a chair. I mean, it was just a day in the life of me, and they absolutely loved it. And they sent me an email, and they were so excited that I had just been myself that day. And then they've done little things along the way since then. They've mailed me little bags of goodies, and the first night I got to New York, and I ran through Central Park with Bart Yasso, and I talked to him and caught up. It was just great. Like, I really, there's some days I still can't even put it into words, how great they were. And they've invited me to come back, and I'm going to go run the United Airlines half marathon in March. As a thank you, they're going to let me come do that. And so it's just been really just a great experience with them.
Definitely. Let's switch the topic a little bit. I just wanted to ask you, you're a mother of 3 kids, and they're growing kids. And as you were trying to be a runner and trying to raise kids, how difficult was it for you?
It is, some days it's so easy, and then some days it is the most difficult thing that I do. I do it every day, and I run every weekend. So it's just something that my kids are used to. And I go off a lot. I travel, and I go to races and things like that. So, sometimes I like to think, oh, they're okay with it and they love it. And then sometimes I can tell when it's too much. And I can tell that, hey, mom's been gone too long, or, I don't need to go anywhere this weekend. And, I've given up several races just for that reason alone. The mom guilt sets in, and and I don't do it. Sometimes they're all busy. They're teenagers, and they've got their own thing going on, and, they're not going to miss me at all. They're off doing their own thing. And even if I were home, they wouldn't be home. So I think it kind of balances out. Some days my husband is not very happy with me, cause I might be out running in the neighborhood, and he's starving, and I have not cooked dinner, or the house is a mess, or, things like that. I think that's probably typical of any mom. I don't necessarily think it's due to my running. I think if I wasn't running, it would probably be the same way. I'd be doing something else, and the house would still be a mess. Because it's definitely not perfect, and I don't live in a show home or anything like that. But I try to keep it all in balance, and I try to, just realize when it's too much, it's just too much. And so, like right now, we're kind of in the middle of marathon season. So I just ran at Disney, and, I've got a few more races coming up. And the thing about it is, if it were just me, I would schedule a few more, because there's so many more I want to. But because I do have a family and I have responsibilities, then I can't go off every weekend, especially as much as I'd like to. So it is easier for me to just run somewhere in Birmingham versus, go drive 3 or 4 hours away. So I've just made it a habit, and it's just what I do. And so they really don't think too much about it. Now, I will say this too. They don't really care too much about it either. So like when I go run 48 miles, they're like, oh, okay, well, what's for dinner? They don't have a concept of like, hey, mom needs to sit down for a few hours. Like that doesn't even bother them. They're just, life goes on. So
definitely. Yeah. It's difficult for me as well. I mean, as many marathons I run, not all of them are local, and not all of them I can take them because of school and everything. I love to take them as much as possible, but sometimes it's not possible. So, I just don't want to be gone all the time, but we have goal as well. So I don't know. It's hard balance for me. I think to try to run those distance, and sometimes you just have to not do it, I guess.
Well, and you do have to pass up some opportunities that you could run, and with like in my circumstance, like I've had a lot of people that say, "Oh, I could never go to Disney without my kid." And I understand that because Disney is ultimately a family vacation spot, and I get it. However, like I said before, when you have to wake up at 2:00 in the morning and you go run a race, and then you're not getting back to your hotel room till 11, 12 o'clock, well, then you take a shower, you eat, you might walk around the parks for a few hours, and then you eat again. You're going to bed at 9, 10 o'clock. It's almost unfair to take your family, because you would not be taking them on a family vacation like they would want to go. And so, plus, the expenses and things like that, I have taken them before on race vacations, but it's just a little bit easier to leave them all at home.
Definitely.
Just for that reason,
Yeah. And then the logistics sometimes is difficult to take everybody everywhere. So
yeah, and my kids are all busy, and they play sports, and they're active, and they're teenagers now, so some are driving, and they're just they don't want to be home. They want to be out with their friends and doing their own thing, and so it definitely has gotten easier for me to slip off and go somewhere.
Definitely.
So the older they get, the easier it'll get. So.
I think that's what I have to look forward for in a couple of years. So.
Right.
Let's try the sprint round, and this will be quick question answer. You can go long, whatever, however it works, and I have a series of questions to ask.
Okay.
What type of shoes do you wear for your racing and training?
Well, I have worn all kinds of shoes. Right now, I'm loving New Balance. Started wearing them, and I like them. I've got a couple of different styles that I wear, and so right now, that's my shoe of choice, New Balance.
Do you use any GPS device?
I do. I have a Garmin.
What is your favorite distance race?
Half marathon.
Because it's half crazy or finish fast?
Yeah. Well, I like the half marathon distance because you have to train for it. You have to constantly train. So I feel like it keeps me in good enough shape to where I don't slack on my running. So I like to run a long run on the weekends. And so I feel like if I'm always signed up for a half marathon, then I can kind of keep that routine that I have going. I run 2 to 3 short runs during the week, and then I do anywhere from, 8, 10, 12 mile run on the weekend. And that's what I like to do. And so a half, I feel like it pushes you just far enough to where I'm able to walk around and I don't feel like I'm too exhausted, but I've gotten a really good workout in.
Yeah, I have not done a half marathons in a while, so I need to do that soon.
Well, and I do like a race medal, so I'm not going to lie about that. I do love race medals.
Yeah, and most of the half will give you race medals, at least those half marathons. Yeah, I have not done a half in so long, just half by itself, I guess.
Yeah.
I need to test it out and see how fast I will go in a half by itself.
Oh, yeah, you would do really well. Yeah. You're fast.
I try. Yeah. Last weekend I ran, and after the half, I was running 1:42 the half, and then the crash of the half. So I have to run. Yeah. I'll have to run the better half in the future. So, do you run any trails, or are you strictly on the road?
I'm mostly on the road. About a year and a half ago, I was out at Oak Mountain and I broke my ankle running on the trail. And I don't run on the trails a lot. So I'm sure I didn't have the right shoes. And then I broke my ankle. And I've ran on the trails a couple of times since then, but I'm really kind of scared to run on the trails since then. So I'm pretty much a road runner.
We touched this a little bit. Do you follow any kind of training plans or specific training plans for your half or full marathons?
I like the Hal Higdon plan. And I've got it written down and for a half or a full or whatever. And I'll map it out. So like I'm kind of a nerd like that. So like if I know a race is coming up a certain distance away, I'll map it out, a certain number of weeks and all of that. But then I will go in and tweak it to match my schedule. So, because I have things on my calendar for months ahead of time, especially with my kids and my family and other races and things like that. So, I don't follow it so hardcore that if I miss, if I exchange a 12-mile run for an 8-mile run, I'm definitely not going to beat myself up about it. And I usually like to give myself a few extra weeks on a marathon or a half marathon training plan just for that reason, because life happens. And I don't know, sometimes, things might come up and I just may not get to run a long run or a training run or something like that. I tweak it to fit my own schedule, and it seems to work for me.
Definitely. I used to have training plans, and lately I have no training plans. I just go run whatever I feel like. I guess I shouldn't do that. I mean, my Boston Marathon's coming soon, so I would like to train, but like you said, life happens so often for me. And
it does. It's just sometimes it's so unpredictable, and, the weather, and I like to train I like to do my long runs with my running group. And, sometimes they're running different races and they're training for different races and they need to run longer miles. I may not need to run those miles, but there again, I don't care. I'm very flexible, and I'll go run 15 miles. And I don't even need to do it, and then some days I'm like, I need to run 15 miles, but I only ran 6 because I want to get back and drink coffee sooner, so I'm very flexible. And again, I just try not to beat myself up about it, and just be a little consistent is, I think that's the key for me is, I just try to always be in some sort of training, and it seems to work. So,
what type of nutrition plan do you follow, or do you follow any?
I'm a pretty healthy eater. I don't eat any sweets, so no desserts, no cookies, pies, ice cream, none of that. I try to drink a protein shake, so I can stay on top of my protein intake. I watch my carbs. Now, I do love pizza, so that's a weakness, and I love potato chips. That's a weakness. But I do try to eat pretty healthy. Like, I don't drink any sodas. I drink a ton of water. And I don't like to eat a lot of fast food either. So I try to just eat a balanced diet. Nothing too crazy. But for me, the key is I don't do the sugars and sweets and things like that.
Definitely. What is your favorite race so far? New York or Disney or any other races that you like?
Well, I have so many for so many different reasons. I love Disney. Obviously it's just the most fun, and it feels like home to me because I basically, my family, they're huge Disney fans. And so I've grown up going to Disney all my life, and I spent more holidays at Walt Disney World than I did in my own home. So that's just home for me. And I wouldn't even know how to live and not run at Disney. New York City is unimaginable. Like, there are days that I'm like, did I really run that race? Like, it was one of those races that I did not want it to end. And I know that sounds crazy because normally in a marathon, you get to, mile 18, 19, 20, and you're just, oh, let it end. I cried at the end because I did not want it to. I mean, I remember in Central Park just about to take that turn where you had, 8/10 of a mile left or 2/10 of a mile left. And I cried and cried because I thought, this is it. It's over. And I don't want it to be over, and I just cried like a baby. But I will say my most favorite race, to this day, and it's a very odd thing, I did not run a step of it. I walked the entire thing. I went up and I did the Runner's World half marathon, and I went up with Runner's World magazine. They invited me up, and I had just broken my ankle, several months before then. And my doctor had released me out of my boot and put me in a brace the day before I left to fly up. That weekend, they do a 5K, a 10K, a trail run, and a half marathon. And it's a total of 26.2 miles. So it's a total of a marathon over the course of the weekend. So it's 4 days or 3 days because you actually do the 5K and the 10K on the same day. But I had to walk the whole thing. Well, first of all, it was painful because I was still in my brace. And, my doctor was telling me I probably shouldn't have done it. It was like something I had never done before. And so it was like something I had to prove to myself that I could run again and I could get back out there and I could do it all. And being out there that long by yourself, walking, was hard for me because the whole race passed me. I could run any distance and then to suddenly be back in the back and walking the whole thing, and limping. And I think I was like third from the last to finish the race. Like I had never ran a race like that before. And so it was just mentally so challenging for me. And I think to this day, that was like my most favorite thing I've ever done because it was something that I did for myself. And I kind of had to do that. Like that was part of my healing process and everything. So that was my most favorite so far.
Wow. That's such a great story. Yep.
Mm-hmm. It was beyond fabulous. I mean, I crossed the finish line and, all the editors of the magazine were standing there for me and they were playing Sweet Home Alabama over the intercom and, I am crying and, they were crying. I mean, it was just, they were so proud of me and, and it was really, I needed that so bad. And because I was feeling so left out, because my whole life, that's what I do for a living. I work in the fitness industry. I run on the weekends. It's my Bama Girl runs. Everything about me is fitness related. And so to break your ankle and then to just be totally out of it, for several months, it was so hard. And so I needed that race more than anything to get me back into it mentally. Cause I was shutting down. And so for me, that to this day, and I didn't know anybody in the race. I mean, I knew the people that I had gone up there with, but it wasn't like a hometown race. I didn't know any of the other runners and things like that. So it was just, to me, it was just exactly what I needed at that time. So that's definitely a favorite of mine.
And helped you lift you up from all the negative stuff you had to go through, the injuries. So that's a great story on its own. So
thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome. Before we conclude this interview, can you give a word of advice to runners out there listen to us to have a passion like you have? And you have a great story. Runners who are just starting would like to hear, or even runners who are a few years into it or 10 years into it. Can you give a word of advice to the runners out there who is listening to us to have a passion of running like what you have?
Some days I have to just sit back and realize, and I'm not trying to brag on myself, but I can go out and I can run 48 miles or I can go run a marathon. And truth be known, if I wanted to go run a marathon tomorrow, I could. So for me, what I try to keep in mind and what I think new runners and even, runners that have been doing this for a long time, it's so important to keep it all in perspective and realize that every single person has their own story and every single runner is their own self and their own runner. And I want to be proud for that person who is running their first 5K. That's huge. It is huge. And so even though I could run 48 miles, I try to keep it in perspective that the person who is just now starting or running their very first 5K, that is the greatest accomplishment, and that same person, like I remember that feeling when I was in my neighborhood and I ran for 2 miles straight. How great I felt. I always want to have that feeling for other people. Even if I can go run 100 miles, I want to keep it very down to earth and just be proud and supportive of everybody, and so that's why for me, every race is not about a PR. And I'm very proud of my friends who can run a PR race or set a PR or things like that. But I'm just as proud for, that person who ran, a sub-4 marathon as I am for the person who is, ran their first mile straight through. I think I just try to keep every person in perspective and not, because I see a lot of people that do that or that don't do that, and they become better and better and better runners. And then they tend to leave behind the people that aren't like they are. And that kind of drives me crazy. Like I always want to be proud for everybody and not just the people who can run as, a certain time or, so many miles or this or that. Like, everybody is different and not everybody has it in them to set a PR and not everybody has it in them to run 48 miles. And so I don't ever want to let any of that go to my head. And I just want to always be that person who supports everyone. So I think that's kind of, my advice is keep it all in perspective. And then if you have goals, don't stop. Just keep going because one day you'll wake up and you'll be reaching your goal and just keep trying.
Definitely a great word of advice. I still remember my 1.6 mile I ran without stopping. I still keep that email that I sent to my mentor saying, hey, I ran 1.6 miles without stopping.
It's just...
Yeah.
It's the little things like that you remember those are the things that got you to where you are today. And so you don't need to lose sight of that. You don't need to forget that. And setting a PR is great, or, running, certain number of days in a row, or these challenges and all of that. Those are all great and wonderful. But there are so many times when I like to, I'll run with a group of friends, and I have friends that'll say, "Oh, well, we don't want to run with you because we don't want to slow you down." And I'm like, no, you know what? I'm running with you because you're my friend, and I want to run with you. I want to support you, and I want to be there. I don't care that I could run this race a lot faster. At this point, it doesn't matter. I would much rather run with my friends and be with my friends and be supportive than run off and do something for myself. Like, it means a lot more to me to be a good friend than it does to set a PR. So that's just kind of where I'm at. I like to be the social, supportive friend. So
that's great. That greatly ends our interview, and with a positive tone and positive note for all the runners out there listening to us. Thanks for your time, and we'll catch you sometime later on the road somewhere, racing or running or just having fun.
Yeah, I'm running Chicago Marathon this year, so I'm sure I'll see you there, and Mercedes, and we've got lots of good races coming up.
Definitely, yeah, lots to look forward for. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Emran's podcast. If you're an iTunes user, please rate, review, and subscribe to our channel.